The weight of hypothalamus is 10 gram only. 10 gram is a very small amount, and size is also few cubic centimeter. But hypothalamus is concerned with lot of important functions. And what are these important functions are there? Hypothalamus is concerned with the regulation of body temperature. We'll take another class on body temperature today itself. Then regulation of activity of anterior pituitary gland. Then formation of posterior pituitary hormone and regulation of their secretions. So there is a difference between the anterior and the posterior pituitary gland. Hypothalamus is concerned with the regulation of activity of anterior pituitary gland. But as far as the posterior pituitary hormone are concerned, it is concerned with the formation also and regulation also. So the posterior pituitary hormone are formed by the hypothalamus, and further hypothalamus is also concerned with the regulation of their secretion. The next is the circadian rhythm, sleep waking cycle. So we'll discuss all this function today. Then integration of autonomic nervous system. They are also concerned with the hunger and feeding, control of water intake, and sensation of thirst. Sometimes you feel hungry, sometimes you feel thirsty, but after taking the adequate amount of the water, you stop drinking. So how the hypothalamus is concerned, we'll discuss today. Then participation in the production of emotional behavior and experience of emotions. So hypothalamus is also important with the genesis. They are important for the production, genesis, and experience of the emotion. So in this, hypothalamus is concerned with the limbic system. So we'll teach you limbic system also later on. So this, in association with the limbic system, hypothalamus is important in the production of the emotional behavior and experiences of the emotion. Then it is also important in the integrated control of cardiovascular system. So these are the things. So the very first question in the hypothalamus we can ask, enumerate the various hypothalamic function. We can ask in the Viva, we can also ask in the theory exam. So you should be familiar, and we have so many functions, 10, even more than 10. So you should at least say 8, 9. So though its control of the endocrine system and the autonomic nervous system, the hypothalamus acts directly on the internal environment to maintain the homeostasis. Basically, this hypothalamus has control of the endocrine system and the autonomic nervous system. It controls the endocrine system by the help of the pituitary gland. It controls the autonomic nervous system because few part they regulate they control the sympathetic, other part they control the parasympathetic ones. So because it has control on the endocrinal system and the autonomic nervous system, the hypothalamus acts directly on the internal environment to maintain the homeostasis. And now, as it control of emotions and motivated behavior, the hypothalamus acts indirectly in maintaining the homeostasis by motivating the animal to act on their environment. So by the help of this emotion and motivated behavior, hypothalamus act uh, in maintaining the homeostasis. हेलो हाँ नमस्कार मैडम जी नमस्कार हाँ गुड मॉर्निंग जी पोस्ट को कर लो आपको अच्छा कॉलेज बंद है कोई लड़ाई वड़ाई तो नहीं होगी अच्छा 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 नहीं अच्छा वो मेरी इवनिंग में भी मीटिंग थी एक एथिकल कुछ वाली तो इसका मतलब वो भी नहीं होगी कोई एथिकल की मीटिंग थी अच्छा ठीक है ठीक है जब बंद है तो फिर तो नहीं हो पाएगा हाँ कोर्स कर दो कोर्स को तो कर लो ठीक ठीक वो देख लेना जैसे मेरे को तो ऑनलाइन ही सही लगता है वैसे हाँ ऑफलाइन हाँ ऑफलाइन हाँ ऑफलाइन ऑफलाइन हाँ ठीक है ठीक है हाँ ठीक चल ओके और सब बढ़िया चल रहा है चल ठीक so basically it control of the endocrine system and autonomic nervous system and maintain the homeostasis. Then it also control, it has its control of emotion and motivated behavior, which indirectly maintaining the homeostasis. So basically, the key concept of hypothalamus is the homeostasis. Its goal is to maintain the internal homeostasis, and there are both neural and hormonal input to and output from the hypothalamus. So if someone is asking you in one word, then you can say the main function of the hypothalamus is homeostasis. And if they are asking in detail, then you have so many functions. These are the functions. So you can tell these functions. So most hypothalamus, it is the most ventral division of the diencephalon. Diencephalon we have discussed. Other part is the thalamus, and this is the hypothalamus. It comprises less than 1% of the total volume of the brain, and it has a major control on the major system: endocrinal system, autonomic nervous system, limbic system, and because of this, they are able to control complex interaction of the physiology and the behavior. And integrated center essential for survival of organism and the reproduction of its species. So it is a integrating center also, and because of endocrinal, autonomic nervous system, and limbic system, this hypothalamus is essential for survival of the organism and the reproduction also. So we have discussed main function is the hypothalamus. It is linked with the external environment also. It is also linked with the internal environment also. So here you can see this is the hypothalamus, this pituitary gland, cerebellum. You'll find the brainstem, medulla, pons, midbrain. This is the cerebral cortex. So here you'll find hypothalamus. So various hypothalamic nucleus can be divided into different regions. The first one is the pre-optic area. This is the pre-optic area, and here you'll find the pre-optic nuclei. The second one is the anterior region or the supra-optic regions, and here you'll find the supra-optic nucleus, suprachiasmatic nucleus, anterior and paraventricular nucleus. So this one is the anterior region. This is the middle or the tuberal region, and here you'll find dorsomedial nucleus, ventromedial nucleus, and the arcuate nucleus. And here you find the posterior region, and in the posterior region you'll find the posterior nuclei and the mammillary body. So this is the mammillary body, and this is the posterior nucleus. Here you'll find the anterior nucleus. And this is the posterior pituitary, this is the anterior pituitary. So as in the case of the thalamus also, which is also a cluster of the various nuclei, here also you'll find so many nuclei are there. So in addition to all these nuclei, we also have one more nuclei, and that lies in the lateral side. In the lateral zone, you'll find one more nucleus is there, and that nucleus is known as the lateral nucleus. So medially, you'll find dorsomedial nucleus, ventromedial nucleus, arcuate nucleus. So all these nucleus you'll find they lie medially and lateral to, not medial to, lateral to. So these they lie medial. So lateral to this you'll find one more nucleus is there, and that is known as the lateral nucleus. We'll understand the role of these nuclei little later in this class. So hypothalamus has connection with the pituitary gland. Now, how the hypothalamus can control the pituitary gland? It is by various releasing and release inhibiting hormone. So we have so many. We have hypothalamic releasing hormone, and what is the effect on the pituitary? This is the effect. So first of all, we have the corticotropin releasing hormone. This is also known as the CRH. And the effect on the pituitary is they will stimulate the ACTH. Namaskar, sir. Namaskar. Hello. हाँ नमस्कार. Hello. हाँ जी hello. Hello. हेलो हाँ नमस्कार हाँ अब आ रही है अब ठीक है कल नहीं है ठीक है ठीक ठीक और वो भी 4 तारीख को हो गया इसका डॉक्टर रिंकू का मैंने बोला था आपसे बात करना हाँ कर लीजिए आप सभी और डॉक्टर वो शास्त्रवादी मनीषा जी हाँ ठीक है ठीक है ओके थैंक यू Okay, sorry for phone, but these phone are important. Okay, so we have the corticotropin releasing hormone. We have the CRH. They stimulate the ACTH secretion from adrenocorticotropic hormone. So they stimulate the ACTH, and that is the adrenocorticotropic hormone. Then next is the thyrotropin releasing hormone. Now it will stimulate the thyroid stimulating hormone. So this one releasing hormone, it is a TRH, and TSH is the thyroid stimulating hormone. These hormones, they are secreted from the pituitary gland. The next is the growth hormone releasing hormone, GHRH. They stimulate the growth hormone from the pituitary. Then growth hormone inhibitory hormone, which is also known as the somatostatin, and it inhibits the growth hormone secretion. Then gonadotropin releasing hormone, GnRH, are luteinizing hormone releasing hormone. Stimulate the luteinizing hormone and the follicular stimulating hormone. Then we have the prolactin releasing hormone, stimulate the prolactin hormone, and the prolactin inhibiting hormone inhibit the prolactin secretion. So basically this hypothalamus is going to release or inhibit certain hormone, and because of this there is a stimulation or inhibition of the pituitary hormone. So this you will understand, and it will be discussed in the endocrinology system. That will be in the next month. I'm not going to discuss in detail this system, but I'm concerned with this. So this hypothalamus, either they release the hormone or inhibit the hormone, and because of this there is a stimulation of pituitary hormone or inhibition of the pituitary hormone. So we have the CRH. This is the pituitary hormone. This is the hypothalamic releasing hormone, and this is the target hormone. So here you'll find this CRH. This will act on the pituitary. There is a ACTH formation, which will act on the adrenal cortex, and it will cause the secretion of corticosteroids. While the TRH from the hypothalamus secrete the TSH, which will act on the thyroid gland, and it will produce the thyroid hormone like the T3 or T4. Then gonadotropin releasing hormone, we have LH, FSH from the pituitary. They act on the testes, secrete the testosterone. They act on the ovary and produce the estrogen and progesterone. Then we also have the prolactin releasing and inhibiting factor, and they act on the prolactin mammary gland, and this thing will be taught in detail in the reproductive system. We also have the somatostatin or somatotrenin, and this will cause the secretion of growth hormone. It will act on the bone and other system. So again, this thing will be taught in endocrinology system. So we have hypothalamus here, we have anterior pituitary gland, we also have the posterior pituitary gland, and hypothalamus control pituitary gland. So in the anterior pituitary gland, there's a releasing factor or inhibiting hormone are there. It will go to the blood supply. It will act on the anterior pituitary gland, which cause secretion of the various pituitary hormone, which will come in the blood. While in the case of posterior pituitary hormone, we have the two important hormone, ADH, that is the antidiuretic hormone, and the oxytocin. So this ADH and oxytocin both are synthesized in cell bodies of the hypothalamic nuclei. Now this ADH is formed by the supraoptic nuclei mainly, and oxytocin is formed by the paraventricular nucleus mainly. While in the case of the posterior pituitary hormone, they are formed by the hypothalamus and they are stored in posterior pituitary gland, and then they are secreted in the arterial blood. And the example of the hormone are ADH or the vasopressin or the oxytocin. Okay, then after that we'll discuss the hypothalamus. Hypothalamus is also considered as a head ganglion of the autonomic nervous system by the Sheddington. Why it is so named head ganglion of the autonomic nervous system? Because it controls the various component of the autonomic nervous system. If you stimulate the anterior hypothalamus, there's an increase in the parasympathetic response, and there's a contraction of urinary bladder. If you stimulate the lateral part, I told you there is a lateral nucleus also. If you stimulate the lateral part, there's an increase in the sympathetic response, increase in the blood pressure, capillary dilation is there. If you stimulate the mid dorsal, there's a increase in the sympathetic cholinergic fiber. So these are the different type of the fiber. Normally we have the adrenergic sympathetic fiber, which causes the vasoconstriction, but here you find there's a vasodilation is there. Then if you stimulate the posterior or the dorsomedial nucleus, then there is an increase in the adrenal medullary secretion. And you'll find they are important in the rage and the fear. So because of the different part, you'll find hypothalamus is concerned with the control of the various parts, say parasympathetic or the sympathetic one. So we are saying hypothalamus is a head ganglia of the autonomic nervous system. Okay, so with this now we'll come to the another important thing, that hypothalamus is also important for the cyclic phenomena. By saying the cyclic phenomena mean it is concerned with the circadian rhythm. Circadian, by saying the circadian mean from the Latin word circa, it is about, and dia means a day. So it is about a day. So you'll find there's a rhythmic fluctuation in the function in 24 hours in length. The important nuclei which is concerned with the circadian rhythm is the suprachiasmatic nucleus. What happens? The fibers, they are going from retina to the hypothalamus by the light, all this thing from the external world, external atmosphere. Light is going to the retina, and from retina it will going to the uh, hypothalamus, suprachiasmatic nucleus. So this suprachiasmatic nucleus is important for the circadian rhythm. So what is the circadian rhythm? It is a 24-hour rhythmic fluctuation in the function. We can take the example like ACTH is there, pituitary hormone is there, sleep wake cycle. Daytime you remain in wake stage, but night you want to go for the sleep. Then activity pattern, then melatonin hormone, gonadotropin hormone, they show some kind of the um, diurnal variation, some kind of the fluctuation. Temperature also you find some kind of the fluctuation. So next is the temperature. So the anterior part, they respond to the heat, while the posterior part, they respond to the cold. So we'll take the important class on temperature also. So after that, we'll come to the control of the hunger and the feeding. Now what will happen? It is a common practice only that after some time, you feel hungry. तो मीटिंग में नॉट में पीडीएस की कोई 2 बजे बात हो गया तो मुझे से इसको देखना और तो बता देना हाँ मीटिंग में आज भी है ना 2 बजे है ना 2 बजे ना 2 बजे अच्छा और आदमी में कोई बात करेगा हाँ अभी तो क्लास है मेरी चले आएंगे 2 बजे ठीक है ठीक है हाँ so there's a control of the hunger and the feeding. So sometimes you feel very hungry and after eating some certain amount of the food then you won't feel hungry. So what happened in both these situations? So this hypothalamus is concerned with both the situations. So we'll discuss this thing, but prior to this, we'll discuss body weight. Our body weight depend on two important things: calorie intake and the utilization of the calories. So it is a very simple thing. If you eat more food and the utilization is less, then your body weight will increase. And if you eat less and utilization of the calories more, then you will lose the weight. So this is the thing is there. We have two important nucleus here. We have the ventromedial nucleus and we also have the lateral nucleus. So this is a lateral nucleus and this is a ventromedial nucleus. So what will happen? This we have the feeding center and satiety center. So feeding center is there and the satiety center is there. So if you stimulate the feeding center, if you stimulate the feeding center, the person will start eating. And if you destroy that, this is severe fetal anorexia. So what is anorexia? Although the food is presented to the person, but he will not eat. Satiety center is there. If you stimulate that, there is a satisfaction is there. That person will not eat. And if you destroy that, there is a hyperphagia. And what will happen? If we destroy it, there is a hyperphagia. And as there is a restriction of the hypothalamic nuclei, a different term has been coined, and that is the hypothalamic obesity. Then feeding center and satiety center is there. There's a anorexia is there. If you destroy this, there's a anorexia. A feeding center cause or function by inhibiting the this satiety center function by inhibiting the feeding center. Feeding center is chronically active. You are always feel little bit hungry. Suppose right now, if any your friend comes to you with sweets, then you will eat. So feeding center is always active, but satiety center function by inhibiting the feeding center. Uh, if you destroy the satiety center, that is the ventromedial nucleus, so if there is a lesion is there, so no satisfaction is there, and person will eat, or this animal will eat and eat. There is a voracious appetite is there, and if there is a lesion in the lateral hypothalamus, which is concerned with the feeding, although the food is presented to this animal, but this animal will not eat, and because this is because of the loss of appetite. Now there is a one term, so this you can see, this animal is eating more and this is less, and this is because of the effect of the various effect on the various hypothalamic nuclei. Then we also have one term, obesity. Obesity is a disease characterized by excessive body fat. Sometimes you'll find your few friends are very obese, and if you say you are a obese, then in our society it is considered as um, a it is not considered a good word. It is considered very badly a bad word. So some abusement is considered. So the people who are medically obese usually are affected by behavior, genetic, and environmental factors that are difficult to control with dieting. So few people are there which are who are medically obese. So in this you'll find there's a change in the behavior. They always want to eat. Some genetical problem is there, or environmental problem is there. That is there. So because of this you'll find they are obese. Now BMI is a word. So BMI, it is a number calculated by dividing a person weight in kg by his or her height in meters square. So this BMI, if it is that is the body mass index. BMI is the body mass index, and normally it is 18.5 to 24.9, and from 25 to less than 30, a person is considered as a overweight, and more than 30, 30 or more than 30 is considered obese. So nowadays, we have one word, metabolic syndrome. If a person is obese, then he is likely to suffer from many disease like the diabetes, hypertension, cancer, and so many disease. They are associated with increase in the body weight in the system. As there is an increase in the body weight, you'll find um, there's a effect on the cardiovascular system, then affect in the other system also, which leads to affect the system. So as a result of this, you'll find diabetes mellitus type 2 occur commonly in obese person. Hypertension also observed in the obese person. And if you reduce body weight, then it is most likely that these things will be reduced. Hypertension and the body hypertension and diabetes mellitus will be recovered, provided we have some kind of diet restriction also. Now, food intake is increased by the neuropeptide Y, orexin A, and orexin B, and the ghrelin. And the food intake is decreased by the melanocyte stimulating hormone, then cocaine and amphetamine regulated transcript GARD, then corticotropin releasing hormone, then melonyl CoA. So these things, they decreases the food intake, while these hormone, they increase the food intake. Commonly, we are asking this regarding the various hypotheses. So we have important hypotheses. So lipostatic hypothesis concerned with the lipid. So here, what will happen? The increase in the free fatty acid by the help of the various neural and the hormonal system. It will affect the hypothalamus and decrease the food intake. And gut peptide hypothesis, the food in GIT, like the polypeptide specifically, they will affect the hypothalamus and there is a decrease in the food intake. Then there is a glucostatic theory. There is a glucose utilization in the hypothalamus. So if there is a increased glucose utilization in the hypothalamus, then some kind of the sensation of the satiety is there. And if there is a decreased glucose utilization, then you'll find a person feel uh, hungry. So we have glucose state in satiety center, that's the ventromedial nucleus, and here if the glucose utilization increases, now the feeding center is inhibited and there's a loss of appetite. And if this glucose utilization decreases, then feeding center remain unchecked, because now satiety center they are working less, so they cannot uh, affect the feeding center, because as I told that satiety center work. This feeding center is chronically active. This feeding center, that is the lateral part, lateral nucleus, this is chronically active, and the ventromedial nucleus, this will function by inhibiting the feeding center. So if this is the ventromedial nucleus is working less, then feeding center become unchecked and there is an increase in the food intake. So this has some application in the diabetes mellitus. So what happened in diabetes mellitus? Blood glucose is high. You'll find blood glucose is very high, but the glucose utilization of the glucose receptor is low. It is because of the insulin deficiency. The insulin is also less in diabetes mellitus, and the glucoreceptor in ventromedial nucleus are different from rest of the brain cell in that they require the insulin for glucose utilization. So this ventromedial nucleus or the glucoreceptor, they require insulin for glucose utilization. And as the insulin is less, so the glucose utilization also less. So the activity of these cells decreases, and now the feeding center get activated. This is unchecked, and this will cause the polyphagia. So the question we can commonly ask in the exam, why there is a polyphagia in diabetes mellitus? Although you'll find the blood glucose is high, but still you'll find always person will feel hungry, and a person will eat the food again and again, and again you'll find the blood glucose increases. We have the thermostatic hypothesis. Body temperature below a set point stimulate the appetite. Body temperature more than set point inhibit the appetite. So normally our body temperature is remain fixed, but somehow if your body temperature decreases, say hypothermia is there, then it will stimulate the appetite. And if our body temperature increases, like in fever, then you'll find it will inhibit the appetite. So you must be knowing that when sometime if you have some kind of a fever, then you won't feel happy to eat something. So there is a loss of appetite. So this thing is there, that the thermostatic hypothesis. Body temperature below the set point stimulate the appetite. Body temperature more than set point inhibit the appetite. So this is the effect of the various hypothalamic nuclei. So with this, now we'll come to the water intake. Now, water intake you will find there's a you are sitting in the class or in your home, then suddenly you realized that you should eat some, you should take some water. You feel thirsty. There's a dryness of your throat. So this drinking. So what are the change occur in your body that make you thirsty? So there are two important factors. There is a decrease in the extracellular fluid volume, and there is an increase in the effective osmotic pressure of the plasma. So when there is a increase in the osmotic pressure of the plasma, you feel drinking the water, and if there is a decrease in the extracellular fluid volume, again you feel thirsty. You have noticed when someone has the accident in the road, then that person usually asks for the water. Why so? It is because, say, some blood has come out, so there's a decrease in the extracellular fluid volume. So now it make it has effect on the hypothalamus, and this make the person thirsty. So there is a requirement of the water. We have the one hormone and enzyme. These are the hormone. They There's a one thing, angiotensinogen. So enzyme renin will act on this, and this will convert angiotensinogen to angiotensin 1. And now the angiotensin 1 is converted into angiotensin 2 by the converting enzyme. So this is a very powerful hormone, and this will do the vasoconstriction of the blood vessels. Then the circumventricular organ, it will stimulate the circumventricular organ, trigger the drinking. It will also cause the vasopressin release, then aldosterone release is also there. So this angiotensin also uh, causes the drinking of the water. We have the renin-angiotensin system. We have the enzyme renin. We also have the angiotensin 2. They act on the subcortical organ. They act on the organum vessculosum of lamina terminalis, where these structures are. So if you say in this diagram, this is the subcortical organ. This is the organum vessculosum of lamina terminalis, and this is the area postrema. So when there is an increase in the hypertonicity, so we have the osmoreceptor. They causes the thirst, and when there is a hypovolemia, they act on the baroreceptor angiotensin to again make you thirsty. Hypertonicity stimulates the osmoreceptor signal and the hypothalamus stimulates the thirst. Hypovolemia stimulates the baroreceptor and angiotensin II, which in turn stimulate the hypothalamus to produce a thirsty sensation. So when there is a hypovolemic thirst, means there is a decrease in the blood volume, extracellular fluid. We have the cardiovascular, they will act on the NTS, nucleus solitary tract, and they will act on the pre-optic area. They also act on the kidney baroreceptor also. So there is a liberation of the renin, and angiotensin II is formed, and they act on the subfornical organ, and they again act on the pre-optic area. And sometimes we have the osmotic thrust. This is the decrease in the volume, and this is the increase in the osmolarity. So this will act on the osmosensory neuron, again act on the pre-optic area. So we have the hypothalamic thrust network, we have the supraoptic nucleus, paraventricular nucleus. So we'll find the vasopressin is released, and this vasopressin release will act in the kidney and cause the water conservation. And this hypothalamus thirst mechanism make you thirsty, so you will drink the water. So we have two important things. One side you are taking the water, and other side you are conserving the water. So this thing happens when there is a decrease the blood volume or increase in the osmolality. So it is just a revision only. In the hypothalamic thirst, you'll find blood volume is decreased, and water loss, respiration, sweating, all these things will also occur. And there is an osmotic thirst. A person will take water, and water intake, drinking, feeding, salt content, all these things will be there. So with this, I stop this class here only. We'll take break for 10 minutes. Say it is 5 minutes to 12. So we'll start on 12:05. So we'll take a break here, and we will discuss again the next chapter after the break. So thank you very much. Mm. Mm, mm, mm. Mm, mm, mm. Okay, friends, we'll start again. And if there is any problem regarding the uh, sound or slide, then inform me. Now I'm starting this another chapter, that is the regulation of the body temperature. As we had discussed the hypothalamus, now you must be familiar that hypothalamus is important for the body temperature regulation. The very first question is why the regulation of body temperature is required. Why you may have the fluctuation in the body temperature? It is because the speed of the chemical reactions, it depend on the body temperature, and the enzyme system work optimally at the narrow temperature range. So if there is a change in the temperature, then you'll find the body function also changes. We have two type of the animals. We have poikilothermic animal. We also have the homeothermic animal. Homeothermic, they are the warm-blooded animal like the man, mammals, birds. And poikilothermic, they have the cold-blooded animal. And there you'll find their body temperature remains the constant. But here the body temperature varies. As there is a change in the atmospheric temperature, their temperature also varies. Another important question is, what is the comfortable zone temperature? So what happens when you are going, say, out of station, stayed in the hotel, and in the night you reduce your room temperature, say 18, 18 degrees Celsius. Now you have observed, okay, your night is very pleasant, but morning you will have infection. So what is the comfortable zone temperature? So what is the meaning of this? So it is the lowest ambient temperature at which mammal can maintain its body temperature at the basal metabolic rate. So this thing is also known as the zone of thermal neutrality or critical or ambient air temperature. So it is considered 27 plus minus 2 degrees Celsius. So at this temperature, even by the help of your basal metabolic rate, you can maintain your uh, body temperature. And if you reduces it, then it is difficult to maintain your body temperature. So what will happen? Your body temperature changes, and body temperature changes, then it will affect. हेलो
हेलो
हाँ जी
हाँ जी सर मनी क्या हाल है आप बोलो
बस ठीक है
अच्छा तो वो 2007 तो हमें जाएगा 2023 वाले में
हाँ नहीं अभी इसमें इंटरेस्टेड नहीं है इसमें रजिस्ट्री तो हो नहीं रही है ना तो इसमें रजिस्ट्री भी तो एक इशू है
मतलब वो तो आपका काम सारा तो ज्वाइन तो इशू
हाँ तो वो तो बहुत टाइम लगेगा ना तो इसमें आपका बना भी नहीं है ना है हाँ फेज वन में नहीं फेज वन में नहीं इस प्रोजेक्ट को तो रहने दो इसकी रेपो भी अभी ठीक नहीं है अब ऐसा है पहले बन जाए फिर देखिए एक बार और रिव्यू कर लेंगे इसको तो अभी फॉर द टाइम बिंग अभी मैं इंटरेस्टेड हूँ वो देख लेंगे बाद में देख लेंगे okay so it is a comfortable zone temperature so if you maintain your room temperature say 27 plus minus 2 degrees Celsius then you'll find it is easy so it is a comfortable zone or the critical air temperature or the zone of the thermal neutrality. Normal body temperature is there. It ranges from 36.3 to 37.1 degrees Celsius. Average it is 37 degrees Celsius. And Fahrenheit it is 97.3 to 98.8 degrees Fahrenheit. Average is considered 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. So we have the recording of the body temperature. So how we can record the body temperature? Usually it is by the help of the oral route. So it is considered as an oral temperature. We also have another term, core temperature. That is the internal body temperature. Temperature to which hypothalamic thermoregulatory receptors are exposed. It is 0.5 to 0.7 degrees Celsius more than oral temperature. And site is the rectum, esophagus, tympanic membrane. And usually you'll find oral temperature vary as you had taken some cold drink or tea. The temperature also vary, but core temperature remain almost same. And this is the temperature to which the hypothalamic regulatory hypothalamic thermoregulatory receptor are exposed. So in human, it is the core body temperature, inner temperature, which is maintained by the homeostasis. So if outside it is warm, then this is the core temperature. But if it is cold outside, then you'll find your hand, your temperature is low, and their lower extremity is also low. So it is like this. Although the inner temperature, core temperature remains same, but your body, peripheral part of the body, their temperature decreases. Various factors are there affecting the body temperature. Age is also important, and you'll find infant, it is generally more than 0.5 degrees Celsius. It is because of the presence of the brown fat. The thermoregulation is also not fully developed. Old age, subnormal. In the old age, you'll find there's a decrease in the activity, so the body temperature is below the normal. And there's a low basal metabolic rate is there, and the thermoregulation is also weak. Sex, female, they slightly have lower temperature due to the low BMR, and menstruation, there's an increase in the temperature, 0.5 degrees Celsius at the time of ovulation, and that is because of the progesterone effect, which is thermogenic in nature. Another term is there, constitutional hyperthermia, and these are the person who has um, uh, normal. Normally they have more temperature, and usually it is more than 100 degree Fahrenheit. Diurnal variation is also there. Morning you'll find the temperature is low, and afternoon, and depending on the situation, temperature also changes. Hyperthyroidism, there's an increase in the BMR, so there increase in the body temperature. Hypothyroidism, myxedema, there's a decrease in the BMR, there's a decrease in the body temperature. So this thing is there. Exercise, there's increases the temperature up to 40 to 41 degrees Celsius. Why there's an increase in the body temperature? It is because inability of heat dissipating mechanism. Okay, so exercise you'll find there's an increase in the body temperature, maybe up to 40 to 41 degrees Celsius, depending on the type of the exercise you are doing. So that is because of the inability of heat dissipating mechanism, and there's a resetting of thermostat also. Emotional factor is also there. Someone is very anxious, tense, so there's a change in the body temperature. So the body temperature may increase to 2 degrees Celsius due to unconscious tensing of the muscles. Then body temperature is determined balance between the heat production and the heat loss. So there are few systems which produces the heat, and there are few systems which decreases the heat. So heat production is there. There's a BMR, which is metabolic rate is there, and it is because of the metabolic activity. And here the 1 kilocalorie per kg per hour heat is generated, and that is 37 to 40 kilocalorie per meter square per hour. And this thing occur because of the activity in the liver, heart, and the skeletal muscle. Then it is also because of the specific dynamic action of the food, like the assimilation of the food. If you are taking the food, again you'll find some kind of the heat production is there. and that is known as the specific dynamic action of the food. Then heat gained from the environmental also. Then brown fat is also there. So that is also important for heat generation. We'll discuss the brown fat little later. So we have the body heat production. So we have some endocrinal mechanism also. So epinephrine and norepinephrine you'll find this is rapid and short-lived increase. So epinephrine and norepinephrine you'll find graph is like this. Suddenly you'll find this increase the uh, temperature and then it is a short-lived increase. While thyroid, it is slowly but prolonged increase. For thyroid, it is slowly but prolonged increase. So there is a difference between the epinephrine and thyroid heat production. For the epinephrine, it is for short duration, but it is rapid. While for thyroid, it is slowly and for prolonged increase is there. Brown fat is there. So this brown fat is more abundant in infant and there is a high rate of metabolism. Uh, they are rich in mitochondria. There is increased fatty acid oxidation is there, and there is a heat production is also there. So this brown fat you'll find they are more abundant in infant, and they have high rate of metabolism. And site you'll find they will find between the scapula, nape of the neck, along the great vessels in thorax and abdomen. So sometimes we are asking about the brown fat. So there's a high rate of the metabolism in the brown fat. Body heat loss. Body heat loss vary with the environmental factor, environmental temperature. We have so many mechanisms, radiation, conduction, convection. So this term you are familiar. And there is a tissue conductance rate. This is a rate by which heat is transferred from uh, deep tissue to skin. This is known as the deep conductance rate. Vaporization 1 ml almost equal to 1 gram remove about 0.6 kilocalorie of heat through the through the skin you'll find there is sweating. Initially it is initiated by the motor cortex and later on you'll find hypothalamus is there, which is important for sweating. We have two important type of the sweating. Thermal. Thermal, by saying the thermal means increase in the temperature is there, and because of this there is a sweating. So this thermal sweating, we have the excrine gland. Here you'll find they are stimulated by the cholinergic fiber, sympathetic nerve fiber. Usually you'll find in palms, sole, atropine, and atropine inhibit this type of swelling. Why atropine inhibit? Because the nature of the chemical is cholinergic, and that is the acetylcholine. While the non-thermal sweating, we have the exocrine gland. It is not because of the increase in the atmospheric temperature and epinephrine. When there is increase in the epinephrine, then you find sweating occur in axilla, nipples, and atropine does not inhibit because atropine cannot inhibit the epinephrine, while atropine can inhibit the acetylcholine. That is the cholinergic. We have there is a insensible water loss is there. Continuously you'll find water is lost. 50 ml per hour. It may be up to 50 ml per hour. To the lung also water is lost or heat is lost 300 ml per day. Then warming and humidifying of the inspired air is also there. which is also contributing factor for heat loss. Then urination and defecation is also there, which is also responsible for heat loss. So we have temperature regulating mechanism. It involves a reflex thermoregulatory response. It is automatic. You need not to order your body. Then we have various changes in the somatic, endocrinal, behavior changes. One group causes the increase in the heat and increase in the heat loss and decrease in the heat production and vice versa. This thing will be clear in the coming slide. So we have the temperature control system. So efferent come from the skin, body core, and hypothalamus is an important structure for that. We have the spinal cord, brainstem, hypothalamus, the neural region, and the effector will find some kind of the behavior changes are there. Like in the winter, what will happen? There's a shivering when atmospheric temperature decreases, then there's a shivering start, which lead to the contraction of the skeletal muscle, and it is important for the genesis of heat. Then there is a heat seeking or the avoiding behavior. Either in the summer, you will avoid the hot places, while in winter, you'll go to the hot places. Then autonomic responses are there. There's a vasoconstriction or dilation. Then there's a sweating, respiration also affected. Then brown fat stimulation is also there. There's a thyroid hormone secretion is also there. So these are the few changes occur in the body. So what happens in the cold? So in cold, there's an increase in the heat production. So this increase in the heat production occur by various ways. Number one, there is a shivering. There is a involuntary skeletal muscle contraction is there. Then there's a hunger, increases the food intake and sympathetic discharge is there. Then increase voluntary activity, semi-conscious. So this shivering, then increase hunger, and there's increase in the sympathetic discharge, which lead to the formation and liberation of more epinephrine, norepinephrine, and there's an increase in the voluntary activity, semi-consciously. You have observed that during the winter, your voluntary activity increases without knowing the thing. You will go here and there. But in summer, it is not like this way. Summer, you will simply sit. There is a heat production and there is increased TSH secretion from the anterior pituitary gland, and there is an increase in the catecholamine, epinephrine and norepinephrine from the adrenal. Thermoregulation activated by the cold. And so what will happen in cold? There is a more heat production. This more heat production is by shivering, hunger, all these things. Hormonal factor is also there. Simultaneously, you'll find there's a decrease in the heat loss also. So you'll find how the heat loss is there. There's a cutaneous vasoconstriction is there, which is maybe local, maybe generalized. The cutaneous vessel, when cooled, they become more sensitive to catecholamine, and this will lead to arteriolar and the venular constriction. And there is also the counter current exchange is also there. So what will happen to this? This is in response to the cold. You'll find there's a brain temperature control region in the hypothalamus. They receive the information, they send the information, to cutaneous blood vessels, they send the information to the muscle for shearing, and the metabolism of the brown fat is also increased. They also activate thyroid hormone to secrete more hormone. Now, what will happen during the uh, summer and winter? Now, here you'll find uh, in winter there is a vasoconstriction. So you'll find there's a vasoconstriction in there. So now the heat will go from this way, and the heat is conserved. And this is the blood vessels in the skin. While in the summer, there's a vasodilation. There's a vasodilation here, and because of vasodilation, the heat will go along with this blood, and from there you'll find heat loss is there across the epidermis, and there's a increased heat loss is there. Vasoconstriction and the vasodilation is there, then mm, heat kept in and retained by the body. There's a now what will happen in the winter time? There's a vasoconstriction. The heat will go from this way, so heat is conserved. While during the summer time, there's a vasodilation. The heat will go here, and from there you'll find there's a loss of heat is there during the summer time. So thermoregulation activated by the cold, and the posterior hypothalamus is important for this. And there's a decrease in the heat loss. How the heat can be further reduced by curling up. By saying the curling up means a person will decrease their body surface area exposed to the atmosphere. So when you are going for sleep, then you reduce your make the such kind of the posture or posture, so your body surface area is reduced, exposed to the atmosphere, and there is a horipilation is there. Horipilation, you find there is a erection of the hair, so that will further reduce the heat. So here you'll find there is a horipilation is there. This is excrine sweat gland, then excrine sweat gland. Then thermoregulation activated by heat, summertime. So now you'll find the anterior hypothalamus is activated. So it will cause the increase in the heat loss, because now body temperature has increased. So we have to we have to increase the heat loss. So that thing is done by cutaneous vasodilation, by sweating, tachypnea is there. There's a decrease in the heat production also. So you'll find in summer there's a anorexia, there's a decrease in the sympathetic discharge, BMR also reduced, person become apathy, inertia, decrease in the TSH is also there. So these mechanisms are controlled by the nervous and the endocrinal system. So what happened during the summer? We'll find again it will cause the dilation of the cutaneous vessel, there's a perspiration, is there, sweating is there, then there is a accelerated respiration is also there. There is a role of the nervous system. There is a thermoregulatory responses are there, are the primarily integrated in the hypothalamus. The afferents come, there is a temperature sensitive cell in the anterior hypothalamus, and they are more important than skin receptors. The cutaneous temperature receptor, there is a rapid environmental changes are there in the skin. Then efferent will go to the autonomic nervous system, modify the muscular, glandular activity, and the cutaneous circulation, sweat secretion, and the pulmonary ventilation. And because of this, you'll find they are able to maintain their body temperature. Now, what is the role of the endocrine adrenal medulla? You'll find they are, when they are exposed to the cold, it will stimulate the epinephrine secretion and stimulate the metabolism and decrease the heat loss. Thyroid, exposed to the cold, stimulate the TSH and thyroid hormone, increases the heat production, mobilize the glycogen and stimulate the gluconeogenesis. So there's an applied aspect you'll find. What will happen? There's a fever is there. The medical term is the pyrexia. So what will happen in fever? Here the thermostat reset to a new point above the 37 degrees Celsius. Okay, so what will happen now? Um, so what is the pathogenesis of the fever? Now, some kind of the infection are there, maybe bacterial or other infection. This will cause the endotoxin. And because of this endotoxin from the bacteria, there is inflammation or the pyrogenic stimuli are there. So they will act on the monocyte, macrophages, and Kupffer cell. And because of this, you'll find the cytokinins and interleukin 1 are produced. And interleukin 1 is also known as the endogenous pyrogens. And they will act on the pre-optic area of the hypothalamus. And here you'll find there's a liberation of the PGE2, which reaches the body temperature. And if you give the aspirin, then you'll find the fever is there. Fever is removed. So this one causes the fever, and if you give the aspirin, it will prevent this and decreases the fever. So in fever, thermostat reset to a new point above the 37 degrees Celsius. The nature of the response depends upon the ambient temperature. The pathogenesis, we have told all this thing. So there are few advantages of fever also. It will inhibit the microbial growth, decreases the tumor growth, and there's a one term, malignant hyperthermia. It must be taught in nerve and muscle section. There's a mutation of the gene of ryanodine receptor. And as there is a mutation in this gene, this in receptor, this lead to excess calcium release, which causes the contraction. And because of this, you'll find there is a hyperthermia. Hypothermia is also there, decrease in the body temperature. Um, it is reversible till 28 degrees Celsius. It is also induced 21 to 24 degrees Celsius in certain type of the surgery. And there is a decrease in the blood loss. So with this, I complete this lecture. So thank you very much. So now I end this seminar, and I will take 2 more classes in the coming Friday. So I will send the link. So thank you very much.